What if I told you that stupidity isn't just the absence of intelligence, but something far more dangerous? A force that can transform brilliant minds into instruments of destruction. A contagion that spreads not through ignorance, but through certainty. A power that doesn't make you dumber. It makes you stop thinking altogether. Picture this. A renowned scientist with multiple degrees suddenly starts believing and spreading dangerous misinformation. A compassionate teacher begins endorsing harmful ideologies. A loving parent starts making decisions that endanger their own children. These aren't evil people. They're not stupid in the traditional sense. They're intelligent, well-meaning individuals who've fallen victim to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer called the power of stupidity. And here's what makes this truly terrifying. It's not happening to other people. It's happening to people just like you and me, right now, in ways we don't even notice. In 1943, from his prison cell in Nazi Germany, waiting to be executed for his role in a plot to assassinate Hitler, Bonhoeffer wrote one of the most haunting observations in human history. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Think about that. A man watching his entire society descend into madness. Watching educated, cultured, religious people support policies that contradicted everything they claimed to believe. And his conclusion wasn't that they were evil. It was that they had stopped thinking. And once thinking stops, evil becomes inevitable. Not because people choose evil, but because they've surrendered the capacity to recognize it. But here's what Bonhoeffer couldn't have known. What he witnessed in Nazi Germany was just the beginning. We're living through something exponentially more dangerous. He saw propaganda spread through newspapers and radio. We're facing algorithms that know exactly which psychological buttons to push. He witnessed one dictator manipulating millions. We're watching billions manipulate each other voluntarily, enthusiastically, every single day. The machinery has evolved. The human vulnerability hasn't. If anything, it's gotten worse. This audiobook will show you something you can't unsee. The architecture of collective stupidity. How it's built. How it spreads. How intelligent people become its carriers without realizing it. And most importantly, how you, right now, reading this, might already be infected. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself believing something simply because everyone around you believed it too? Have you ever shared something online without verifying it? Have you ever dismissed evidence because it contradicted what you wanted to be true? Keep those questions in mind, because the uncomfortable truth is this: we're all vulnerable. Every single one of us. And the moment we think we're immune is the moment we've already succumbed. Let's begin with the man who first saw it coming, and then died trying to stop it. Part 1. The Anatomy of Surrender. Chapter 1. The Man Who Saw It Coming. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wasn't your typical philosopher, sitting in an ivory tower, pondering abstract ideas. He was a German Lutheran pastor born in 1906 into an intellectual family. His father was a prominent psychiatrist and neurologist. His siblings were lawyers, scientists, scholars. Bonhoeffer had every reason to believe in the power of education, rational discourse, and human decency. And then he watched all of it collapse. As the Nazi Party rose to power in the 1930s, Bonhoeffer witnessed something that shattered his faith in human rationality. His fellow Germans, educated, cultured, deeply religious people, began supporting policies and leaders that contradicted everything they claimed to believe. These weren't ignorant masses being manipulated by clever propaganda. These were professors, doctors, clergy members, intellectuals, people who should have known better, people who did know better, but who stopped thinking anyway. What made Bonhoeffer's observation so revolutionary was this: he didn't blame it on evil, he blamed it on stupidity. Not lack of intelligence, but a kind of functional stupidity, a surrender of the capacity to think independently. And he realized something terrifying. This stupidity was more dangerous than evil, because evil knows it's wrong. Stupidity believes it's right. In his letters from prison, written in 1943, Bonhoeffer explained, "The fact that the stupid person is often stubborn must not blind us to the fact that he is not independent. In conversation with him, one virtually feels that one is dealing not at all with him as a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of him." Read that again. Slogans and catchwords that have taken possession of him. He wasn't talking about a person who lacked intelligence. He was talking about a person who had been colonized by ideas they hadn't examined, a vessel for thoughts that weren't their own, a puppet whose strings were being pulled by forces they couldn't see. And here's what made this observation so chilling. Bonhoeffer was describing educated people, people with university degrees, people who read books, people who attended church, people who, by every measure, should have been resistant to manipulation. But they weren't, because intelligence doesn't protect you from stupidity. Knowledge doesn't protect you. Education doesn't protect you. Nothing protects you if you've surrendered the capacity to think independently. Bonhoeffer wrote, "Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's prejudgment simply need not be believed. In such moments the stupid person even becomes critical. And when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all this the stupid person, in contrast to the rogue, is utterly self-satisfied and, being easily irritated, becomes dangerous by going on the attack." Notice the precision of this observation. The stupid person becomes critical when faced with contradictory evidence, but not genuinely critical, defensively critical. They don't examine the evidence to see if they're wrong. They attack the evidence to prove they're right. This isn't ignorance. It's active resistance to knowledge, and it's everywhere. Bonhoeffer identified something else crucial. Stupidity often emerges not from individual failings, but from systemic pressures. It becomes clear, he wrote, that stupidity is not a psychological problem, but a sociological one. People don't become stupid in isolation. They become stupid together, in groups, in movements, in societies where thinking independently becomes difficult and costly. And this is where Bonhoeffer's theory becomes urgent for us today. He was describing 1930s Germany. Imagine what he'd say about 2024, about algorithms designed to feed you what you already believe, about social media that rewards emotional reactions over careful thought, about a 24-hour news cycle that profits from outrage, about an education system that teaches compliance instead of critical thinking, about an economic system that makes people too stressed, too exhausted, too overwhelmed to think carefully about anything. We've built a machine for manufacturing collective stupidity, and we're all living inside it. Bonhoeffer saw the prototype. We're experiencing the final form. And just like in Nazi Germany, the people most affected don't realize it's happening, because stupidity doesn't feel like stupidity from the inside. It feels like certainty. It feels like clarity. It feels like finally understanding the truth that everyone else is too blind or too corrupt to see. On April 9th, 1945, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was executed by hanging. He was 39 years old. Germany would surrender less than a month later. His last words, according to a fellow prisoner, were, "This is the end for me, the beginning of life." He died defending something that seems almost quaint now: the right to think for yourself, the duty to question authority, the courage to stand alone when everyone else has surrendered their minds to slogans and certainty. He understood that when people stop thinking independently, they stop being fully human. They become, in his words, mere tools in the hand of another. The question he left us with, the question that haunts every page of his prison writings, is this: who stands fast when the pressure to conform is overwhelming, when thinking independently requires courage, when the cost of truth is higher than the price of comfortable lies? Who stands fast? And the even more uncomfortable question: are you standing fast right now? Or have you already surrendered without noticing? Chapter 2. The experiment that proved Bonhoeffer right. 16 years after Bonhoeffer's execution, a psychologist at Yale University decided to test something disturbing. How easily could ordinary people be made to do terrible things? Stanley Milgram's 1961 obedience experiments have become legendary, but most people misunderstand what they actually proved. The setup was simple. Volunteers were told they were participating in a study about learning and punishment. They were instructed to administer electric shocks to another person, actually an actor, every time they answered a question wrong. The shock started at 15 volts and increased incrementally to 450 volts, clearly marked as XXX danger, severe shock. Here's what happened. As the voltage increased, the actor in the other room would scream in pain, beg to be released, eventually fall silent. The volunteer administering shocks would often show signs of distress, sweating, trembling, protesting to the experimenter. But when the experimenter calmly said, "The experiment requires that you continue," most people did. 65% of participants delivered what they believed were lethal 450-volt shocks. 65%. These weren't sadists. They weren't mentally ill. They were ordinary people, teachers, engineers, salesmen, housewives, normal people who had temporarily surrendered their capacity for independent moral judgment to an authority figure in a lab coat. But here's what most people miss about Milgram's experiments. The volunteers weren't blindly following orders. They were conflicted. They protested. They questioned. Many were visibly distressed. But they continued anyway. Why? Because stopping would require something harder than continuing. It would require taking personal responsibility for defying authority. It would require trusting their own moral judgment over the expert's instructions. It would require standing alone. And standing alone is terrifying, evolutionarily dangerous, socially costly, psychologically painful. So they didn't. They kept shocking. And afterward, when Milgram interviewed them, most rationalized their behavior. "I was just following orders." The experimenter said it was okay. "I didn't want to ruin the experiment. I assumed they knew what they were doing." This is exactly what Bonhoeffer witnessed in Nazi Germany. Not evil people doing evil things. Ordinary people who had surrendered their capacity for independent judgment, who outsourced their thinking to authority figures, who found it easier to obey than to think, who believed that following instructions absolved them of responsibility for the consequences. Milgram's experiments proved something chilling. Bonhoeffer was right. Stupidity, the surrender of independent thought, isn't rare. It's the default. Under the right conditions, most people will do it, and they won't even recognize it's happening. But it gets worse. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments in the 1950s showed that you don't even need an authority figure. You just need a group. Asch put people in a room with actors and showed them 3 lines of obviously different lengths. He asked which line matched a reference line. The answer was obvious. Line B clearly matched. But when the actors all said line C, something remarkable happened. 75% of real subjects conformed to the group's wrong answer at least once. 1/3 conformed consistently. After the experiment, Asch interviewed subjects. They knew the group was wrong, but they went along anyway. Why? I didn't want to look stupid. I thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. Everyone else seemed so sure. This is the tribal mind overriding individual perception. Group consensus becomes more real than observable reality. And this is what Bonhoeffer meant when he said stupidity is sociological, not psychological. You don't need to be stupid to act stupid. You just need to be part of a group. And groups, families, political parties, religious communities, online tribes, create enormous pressure to conform, to think what the group thinks, to see what the group sees, to believe what the group believes, even when it contradicts your own eyes. Now combine Milgram's obedience experiments with Asch's conformity experiments. Authority plus group pressure. That's the formula for collective stupidity. And we're swimming in it. Every day. Online and off. Authority figures, experts, influencers, celebrities, politicians, combined with group pressure, likes, shares, retweets, upvotes, create an environment where independent thought becomes almost impossible. You're not just fighting your own cognitive biases. You're fighting millions of years of evolution that wired you to obey authority and conform to groups. And you're fighting a technological infrastructure specifically designed to exploit these vulnerabilities. You're not stupid for falling for it. You're human. But being human isn't enough anymore. Because the machine that's exploiting your humanity has gotten too sophisticated. The question isn't whether you're vulnerable to what Bonhoeffer called stupidity. You are. The question is, are you aware of it? Are you actively resisting it? Or are you, right now, believing something simply because an authority figure said it and your group confirmed it? Think carefully, because the answer might be more uncomfortable than you realize. Chapter 3. The Architecture of Intellectual Surrender. Let me show you how collective stupidity is manufactured. Not by evil geniuses in dark rooms. By systems. Systems that have evolved to exploit specific vulnerabilities in human psychology. Systems that are operating right now. On you. On everyone you know. Invisibly. Efficiently. Profitably. Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on decision-making, discovered something fundamental about how your brain works. You have two systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional, unconscious. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical, conscious. And here's the problem. System 1 runs your life. System 2 is lazy. It only activates when absolutely necessary. And even then, it tires quickly. Think about your morning. Did you consciously decide how to brush your teeth? Which sock to put on first? How to make your coffee? No. System 1 handled it. Automatically. Without thought. That's efficient. Your brain conserves energy by automating routine tasks. But here's the catch. System 1 doesn't distinguish between brushing teeth and forming political opinions. It automates both. And that's where collective stupidity begins. Because forming opinions shouldn't be automatic. But for most people it is. System 1 detects a pattern, jumps to a conclusion, feels right. System 2 is supposed to verify. But System 2 is expensive. It burns energy. So your brain takes shortcuts. It confirms what System 1 already believes. Ignores contradicting evidence, rationalizes, defends, all while making you feel like you thought it through. This isn't stupidity in the traditional sense. It's cognitive efficiency. But in a world designed to exploit that efficiency, cognitive efficiency becomes functional stupidity. You're not thinking. You're processing. And what you're processing was designed by someone else. For their purposes. Not yours. Now add confirmation bias. Once System 1 detects a pattern, System 2's job is to verify it, right? Wrong. Psychologist Tom Gilovich found that people are 7 times more likely to seek information that confirms their beliefs than information that challenges them. 7 times. You're not researching. You're confirming. and confirmation feels like thinking. But it's the opposite. It's intellectual surrender dressed up as investigation. This is why smart people believe dumb things. Intelligence doesn't protect you from cognitive bias. Often it makes it worse. Because intelligent people are better at constructing elaborate rationalizations for what they already believe. Their system, too, is more articulate, more persuasive, more confident, but it's still just serving system one snap judgment. Intelligence becomes a weapon for defending unreason, and the smarter you are, the more dangerous your stupidity becomes. A Yale study demonstrated this perfectly. Researchers gave people mathematical problems, but first they asked political affiliation. Then they gave a problem about gun control. The data was identical for everyone, but interpretation was political. Conservatives saw the data as proving guns reduce crime. Liberals saw the same data as proving guns increase crime. Both groups thought they were being objective. Neither was. Their system one had already decided based on tribal identity. System two just found numbers to support it. This is collective stupidity in action, not lack of intelligence. Misuse of intelligence. Using thinking to defend feeling. Using logic to justify emotion. Using reason to rationalize unreason. And it's everywhere. Every social media debate. Every political argument. Every tribal conflict. People aren't thinking. They're defending. System one has chosen a side. System two is providing ammunition. Truth is irrelevant. Tribal victory is everything. Jonathan Haidt, social psychologist, explains this with a metaphor. Your system one is an elephant. Your system two is the rider sitting on top. The rider thinks they're in control, decides where to go. But really, the elephant goes where it wants. The rider just rationalizes the direction afterward. You think you're steering your thoughts. You're not. You're justifying your impulses. And the elephant responds to specific things, threats, opportunities, social status, tribal belonging, emotional satisfaction. The elephant doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival, about feeling good, about fitting in. And the rider, desperately maintaining the illusion of control, makes up rational-sounding reasons for wherever the elephant goes. This is why facts don't change minds, because facts address the rider. But the elephant isn't listening. The elephant has already decided based on feeling, and no amount of logic will override feeling. The rider will just find different facts, or reinterpret the same facts, or ignore facts entirely. Whatever keeps the elephant happy. Robert Cialdini spent decades studying persuasion. His findings? People don't make decisions based on information. They make decisions based on mental shortcuts. He identified 6: reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, social proof. Notice something? None of these involve actual thinking. They're all shortcuts. Automatic, fast. System one. And marketers, politicians, propagandists, they all know these shortcuts. They exploit them constantly. Because when you're running on autopilot, you're predictable, controllable, profitable. Your elephant can be herded. Your rider doesn't even notice. Because from the inside, it all feels like independent thought, like rational decision-making, like you being you. But it's not. Most of what you believe because your system one pattern matched something and your system two confirmed it. Most of what you think because it serves some emotional or social need that has nothing to do with truth. Most of what you defend because questioning it would threaten your identity, your tribe, your sense of certainty in an uncertain world. The average person makes 35,000 decisions per day. If you try to think through each one, you'd be paralyzed. So system one handles most of them, automatically. But here's the problem. You can't tell which decisions system one is making and which ones you're actually thinking about. It all feels like you. All feels like conscious choice. But most of it isn't. Most of it is conditioning, programming, automated responses that you think are thoughts. And this is where collective stupidity flourishes. Millions of people, all running on similar autopilot programs, responding to similar triggers, all think they're thinking for themselves. But they're not. They're executing code. Social code, cultural code, tribal code, algorithmic code. And the code is identical across huge populations. Which is why everyone suddenly has the same opinion at the same time. Not because they independently thought it through. Because they all responded to the same trigger. Automatically. Predictably. Stupidly. The only way out is awareness. Noticing when you're on autopilot. Noticing when System 1 is driving. Noticing when you're defending instead of discovering. Noticing when you're pattern matching instead of analyzing. Noticing when you're confirming instead of investigating. That noticing is the beginning of actual thinking. But it's hard, because autopilot feels like thinking. Defending feels like reasoning. Pattern matching feels like insight. Your brain is designed to trick you into thinking you're thinking when you're not. Collective stupidity is what happens when millions of people fall for that trick simultaneously. And the machinery that's exploiting this trick has gotten exponentially more sophisticated. Which brings us to the most dangerous development of all, the algorithm. Part 2. The Machinery of Mass Delusion. Chapter 4. The algorithm that knows you better than you know yourself. Let me tell you about a machine that knows you better than you know yourself. It knows what makes you angry before you're angry. What makes you click before you know you're interested? What keeps you scrolling at 2 a.m. when you should be sleeping? What makes you share without reading? What makes you argue with strangers? What makes you feel smart without actually learning anything? This machine isn't science fiction. It's the algorithm. And it's running your life. More precisely, it's running the elephant. And the rider doesn't even know it's happening. Here's what most people don't understand about algorithms. They're not neutral. They're not just showing you what you want. They're teaching you what to want, shaping your desires, sculpting your attention, training your brain like you train a dog. Reward, punishment, reward, punishment, until you don't even notice you're being trained. Mark Zuckerberg once said Facebook's algorithm shows you what matters to you. But here's what he didn't say. The algorithm decides what matters to you by watching what you click. Then it shows you more of that. Then you click more. Then it shows more. It's a feedback loop. And feedback loops don't lead to truth. They lead to amplification, extremism, certainty, stupidity. If you click on one conspiracy theory, the algorithm thinks, oh, they like conspiracies. So it shows you 10 more. Not because they're true. Because engagement is the goal. Truth is irrelevant. You clicked. That's all that matters. The algorithm doesn't care if the world burns. It cares if you're watching. And what keeps you watching? What triggers your elephant? Fear, outrage, tribal belonging, emotional satisfaction, pattern recognition. A Stanford study found something terrifying. People spend an average of 2.5 hours per day on social media. That's 912 hours per year. 38 days. More than a month of your life. Every year. Feeding the algorithm. And what does the algorithm feed you? The intellectual equivalent of junk food. High calorie. Zero nutrition. Delicious in a moment. Rotting you from the inside. Think about what happens to your brain during those 2.5 hours. You're not reading books. Not having deep conversations. Not thinking through complex problems. You're scrolling. Reacting. Feeling. Not thinking. The algorithm has trained you that thinking is slow. Boring. Unnecessary. Just feel. React. Share. Move on. System 1 engaged. System 2 dormant. Elephant driving. right or asleep. Neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley explains, every time you switch your attention, there's a cognitive cost. Your brain has to reorient, refocus, rebuild context. On social media, you're switching attention every few seconds. Post, ad, comment, notification, video, meme. Your brain is constantly reorienting, never focusing, never going deep, always surface level. And surface level is exactly where stupidity thrives. This isn't accidental. It's by design. The longer you stay, the more ads you see, the more data they collect, the more money they make. Your attention is the product. You're not the customer. You're the inventory, being sold to the highest bidder, 1,000 times a day. And your elephant loves it, because your elephant was designed for instant gratification, for quick pattern recognition, for tribal signals, not for careful thought, not for nuanced analysis, not for truth. But here's where it gets darker. The algorithm doesn't just steal your time. It shapes your thoughts. Stanford researcher Michael Kosinski showed that with just 300 Facebook likes, an algorithm can predict your personality better than your spouse. With 150 likes, better than your parents. With 70 likes, better than your friends. 10 likes, it knows your race, sexuality, and political views with shocking accuracy. Now ask yourself, if the algorithm knows you that well, can it also shape you? Can it show you content designed to make you more predictable, more controllable, more profitable? The answer is yes, and it's already happening. Every time you see a post that makes you outraged, that's not random. The algorithm learned that outrage keeps you engaged, so it finds more things to outrage you. Every time you see something that confirms what you already believe, that's not coincidence. The algorithm learned that confirmation feels good, so it builds you a perfect little bubble where you're always right, always validated, always comfortable. But comfort is the enemy of growth. Confirmation is the enemy of truth. And bubbles always pop. Usually at the worst possible moment. Usually when you're so certain that you've stopped checking if you're wrong. And that certainty, that's functional stupidity. That's what Bonhoeffer warned about. That's what Milgram demonstrated. That's what the algorithm manufactures. At scale. With precision. For profit. Here's the scariest part. You think you're immune. I know about filter bubbles. I follow diverse viewpoints. I think for myself. But the algorithm doesn't care what you think you're doing. It cares what you actually do. And what you actually do is click on things that make you feel something. Anything. Because feeling is faster than thinking. Easier. More addictive. More profitable. The average human attention span has dropped from 12 seconds in 2000 to 8 seconds today. That's shorter than a goldfish. We've literally made ourselves dumber than fish. And we did it voluntarily. We traded depth for speed, reflection for reaction, wisdom for content. And the algorithm loves it. Because stupid people are easier to monetize. Predictable people are easier to control. Distracted people are easier to manipulate. Tristan Harris, former Google design ethicist, calls it a race to the bottom of the brainstem. Every app, every website, every platform is competing to hijack your elephant. And they're using techniques designed by neuroscientists, tested on millions, optimized for addiction, not engagement, addiction, variable reward schedules, like slot machines. Pull lever. Maybe win. Maybe lose. Dopamine fires on the maybe. Not the win. The uncertainty. Now think about social media. Scroll down. Maybe something interesting. Maybe not. Dopamine fires on the maybe. Not the content. The possibility of content. That's why you can't stop scrolling. Even when everything is boring. You're chasing the maybe. And platforms know this. They designed for it. deliberately. Instagram shows posts out of chronological order. Why? To create uncertainty. You never know if the next scroll will be good or bad. That uncertainty drives compulsive checking. Facebook does the same. Twitter, TikTok, all of them. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day. Every 10 minutes. Even in the middle of conversations. Movies, meals, sleep. We're interrupting our lives to check for maybes and calling it staying connected. But we're not connected. We're addicted. There's a difference. And the addiction isn't accidental. It's engineered by people who understand your brain better than you do, who know exactly which buttons to push, who profit when you can't stop, who've built a machine that turns thinking humans into clicking zombies. And here's what makes this worse than anything Bonhoeffer saw. The Nazi propaganda was obvious. Loudspeakers, rallies, uniforms. You knew you were being propagandized. You could resist if you chose. But the algorithm? It's invisible. It feels like your choice, like your interests, like your thoughts. The propaganda doesn't announce itself. It pretends to be your preferences. And your elephant believes it. Because your elephant can't tell the difference between what you want and what you've been trained to want. This is the machinery of collective stupidity. Not visible, not obvious, not resistible through willpower alone. Because it's not targeting your conscious mind. It's targeting your elephant. And your elephant is winning. Every day, every scroll, every click. While your rider rationalizes it all as personal choice, as staying informed, as connecting with others, as thinking for yourself. But you're not thinking for yourself. You're thinking what the algorithm has trained you to think, and so is everyone else, which creates the illusion of consensus, the illusion that everyone suddenly agrees about something. But they don't independently agree. They've all been fed the same content, by the same algorithm, designed to create the same emotional response, which feels like independent thought, but it's synchronized stupidity, manufactured, profitable, invisible. This is why Bonhoeffer's warning is more urgent now than ever. The machinery that creates functional stupidity has evolved from propaganda to personalized manipulation, from one dictator to a trillion-dollar industry, from obvious to invisible, from resistible to irresistible. Unless you know it's happening, unless you notice the elephant being herded, unless you wake up the rider. And that's harder than it's ever been, because the machinery has gotten that good. Chapter 5. The education system that teaches obedience, not thinking. Let me tell you about the factory that produces the raw material for collective stupidity. It's called school. And it's working exactly as designed, just not in the way you think. John Taylor got taught in New York public schools for 30 years. He was named New York City Teacher of the Year. Then he quit. His resignation letter was published in the Wall Street Journal. Want to know why he quit? Because he realized he wasn't teaching kids to think. He was teaching them to obey. And he could no longer pretend otherwise. In his book, Dumbing Us Down, Gatto writes, "Schools teach exactly what they are intended to teach, and they do it well. How to be a good Egyptian and remain in your place in the pyramid." That's not education. That's domestication. Training humans the way you train animals. Pavlov with textbooks. Skinner boxes with desks. Think about how school actually works. You sit in rows. You're told when to speak, when to move, when to eat, when to pee. You memorize information for tests, then forget it immediately after. You're graded not on understanding, but on compliance. Can you regurgitate what the teacher said? Can you follow instructions? Can you sit still for 6 hours without causing problems? Can you raise your hand? Wait your turn. Do what you're told. That's not education. That's obedience training. Training for a life where authority tells you what to think and you repeat it back. Training where questioning is punished and conformity is rewarded. Training that prepares you perfectly for what comes next. Being a citizen who doesn't question authority. An employee who follows orders. A consumer who believes advertising. A voter who repeats slogans. In other words, the perfect raw material for collective stupidity. But here's what they don't tell you. The modern school system wasn't designed to create thinkers. It was designed to create workers, specifically factory workers, obedient, punctual, compliant, comfortable with repetitive tasks. The Prussian education model from the 1800s, which most Western education is based on, had one explicit goal: create loyal soldiers and efficient workers for the industrial state. And we're still using that model. In 2024, in the information age, teaching kids industrial age skills, memorization, standardization, conformity, while the world needs creativity, critical thinking, adaptability, we're preparing children for a world that no longer exists, training them for jobs that are being automated, teaching them to be replaceable cogs in a machine that's being replaced, and wondering why they graduate unprepared for reality. Sir Ken Robinson, education expert, said it perfectly. We are educating people out of their creativity. Schools don't reward creative thinking. They reward correct answers. But life doesn't have correct answers. Life has complex, messy, ambiguous situations that require judgment, nuance, thought, and school never teaches that. School teaches the opposite. There's always one right answer. Authority has it. Your job is to find it and repeat it. This creates adults who look to external authority for truth instead of developing internal discernment. Adults who need experts to tell them what to think instead of learning how to think for themselves. Adults who panic when faced with ambiguity because they were never taught to tolerate it. Adults perfectly prepared for what Bonhoeffer called functional stupidity, because they've spent 12 to 16 years being trained not to think independently, being punished for questioning, being rewarded for obedience. The University of California tracked critical thinking skills in college students from 2000 to 2015. The results: a 30% decline in analytical reasoning, a 25% decline in problem-solving ability, students scoring lower on basic logic tests than their parents' generation, not because they were less intelligent, because they were less trained in actually thinking, more trained in test-taking, in memorization, in compliance, in exactly what the system needed from them. But here's the deeper problem. This system creates adults who believe thinking is what happens in school. Once you graduate, you stop learning, stop questioning, stop growing. You've been trained that education is something that happens to you, not something you do for yourself. So you stop. You coast. You repeat opinions you heard somewhere without examining them. You become a vessel for other people's thoughts instead of a generator of your own. And this is by design, not conspiracy. Design. Because a population that thinks for itself is unpredictable, hard to manage, difficult to market to, impossible to control through simple propaganda. But a population trained to wait for authority to tell them what to think, that's manageable, profitable, controllable, perfect for a society that needs consumers, not citizens, employees, not entrepreneurs, followers, not leaders. Ask yourself, when was the last time school taught you how to evaluate sources, how to spot logical fallacies, how to think through moral dilemmas without a rubric, how to question assumptions, how to hold two opposing ideas in mind simultaneously without choosing sides? If you're honest, the answer is probably never, because that's not what school is for. School is for compliance training, for teaching you that There are authorities who know the right answers, and your job is to memorize and repeat them. And it works beautifully. By the time you graduate, questioning feels uncomfortable, rebellious, wrong. Authority feels comfortable, safe, normal. You've been trained to trust experts over your own judgment, to value consensus over independent thought, to fear being wrong more than never learning. And that training is invisible, because it feels like education, like you learned to think, but you didn't. You learned to comply, and you can't tell the difference from the inside. The evidence is everywhere. Adults who can't distinguish between correlation and causation, who confuse facts with opinions, who believe the first thing they read without verification, who outsource their thinking to talking heads on TV, who vote based on slogans instead of policies, who argue without understanding what they're arguing about, not because they're stupid, because they were trained not to think. And that training is so deep, so thorough, so normalized, that they believe they're thinking when they're just complying. This is the foundation of collective stupidity. Not lack of intelligence, not absence of information, but presence of training. Training that teaches you to trust authority over evidence, to value obedience over curiosity, to repeat instead of reflect, to accept instead of analyze. 12 years of this training, sometimes 16, sometimes more, until thinking for yourself feels dangerous, uncomfortable, wrong, until the elephant has been thoroughly domesticated, and the rider has forgotten that alternatives exist. Bonhoeffer saw this in Nazi Germany. Educated people supporting madness, not because they were evil or stupid, because they'd been trained to obey authority, to trust experts, to follow the crowd. And when authority became corrupt, when experts became propagandists, when the crowd became a mob, they had no tools to resist, because they'd never been taught to think independently. They'd been taught the opposite. And when the test came, they failed. Not intellectually, morally, because moral courage requires the ability to think for yourself. And thinking for yourself requires training that most people never get. The school system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. Just not for you. For the people who need you manageable, predictable, compliant, and unable to recognize that you've been trained into stupidity. Because recognizing it would require thinking critically about the system that taught you. And the system made sure you can't. Chapter 6. The media that manufactures your reality. Turn on the news. Any channel. CNN, Fox, BBC, MSNBC. They're all doing the same thing. They're not informing you. They're programming you. And the programming is so sophisticated that you don't even notice it's happening. You think you're forming your own opinions. You're not. You're reaching conclusions that were designed for you to reach. Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman wrote Manufacturing Consent in 1988. The book revealed how media creates public opinion instead of reporting it. But here's what's changed since 1988. The techniques have gotten infinitely more subtle, more effective, more all-encompassing, and people are more convinced than ever that they're thinking for themselves. Let me show you how it works. The media doesn't lie. That would be too obvious, too easy to catch. Instead, it selects, it frames, it emphasizes, it omits. It does this so skillfully that you don't notice what you're not being shown. You only see what they want you to see. And from that curated selection, you think you're forming your own conclusions. You're not. You're reaching the conclusion they designed you to reach, without knowing you were designed to reach it. Example, a protest happens. 10,000 people march peacefully. 50 people break windows. Which story does the media show? The broken windows. On loop. With dramatic music. Close-ups of fire. Angry faces. Within hours, the entire protest is reduced to violent riot. The 10,000 peaceful people vanish from the narrative, not because the media lied, because they selected. And selection is more powerful than lying, because it's invisible. Walter Lippmann, one of the most influential journalists of the 20th century, wrote in 1922, "The public must be put in its place, so that each of us may live free of the trampling and the roar of a bewildered herd." Read that again. The man who shaped modern journalism believed the public was a bewildered herd that needed to be managed. Not informed, managed. And that's exactly what media does. It manages perception. It sets the agenda. It decides what's important and what isn't. Here's the technique: repetition. The same story, the same angle, the same phrases, repeated on every channel, in every newspaper, on every website, until it feels like truth. Not because it was verified, because it was repeated. And repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. Comfort creates acceptance. Your elephant likes familiar things. Familiar feels safe. True. Right. Even when it's none of those things. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi propaganda minister, understood this. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. But modern media is smarter than Goebbels. It doesn't repeat lies. It repeats frames, angles, emphasis. The facts might be accurate, but the frame makes you interpret those facts in a specific way. And that's more effective than lying, because you think you came to the conclusion yourself, based on facts, using your brain, but you didn't. You reached the conclusion the frame was designed to produce, and you can't see the frame because you're inside it. Watch how media covers different groups. When a corporation fires 10,000 workers, the headline is "Company Streamlines Operations." When a union demands better wages, its workers threaten economy with demands. Same action, different frame. The corporation is streamlining. The workers are threatening. The language isn't neutral. It's designed to make you feel a certain way, to take a side, before you even have the facts, before you've thought it through, before your writer has engaged. Your elephant has already been directed, and you call that being informed. Or look at how media talks about war. When our military bombs a country, it's precision strikes or surgical operations. When they bomb us, it's terrorist attacks or brutal violence. Same action, different language, because language shapes thought. And if they control the language, they control how you think about events. George Orwell knew this. In 1984, he created Newspeak, a language designed to make certain thoughts impossible. If you don't have words to express an idea, you can't think that idea. Modern media does this constantly. They give you vocabulary for some ideas, deny you vocabulary for others. Ideas they want you to get names, descriptions, endless discussion. Ideas they don't want you to have. Those just aren't mentioned. Ever. Until those ideas become literally unthinkable. Not because you're stupid. Because you don't have the language. And without language, thought is impossible. Your elephant can't go where there's no path. And media builds the paths. Carefully. Deliberately. For purposes you don't see. But here's the really insidious part. The illusion of choice. In the U.S., 6 corporations control 90% of media. 6. Not hundreds. Not thousands. 6. And they all have the same incentives. Keep people watching. Keep advertisers happy. Keep shareholders satisfied. Truth is way down the priority list. Maybe not even on the list. Because truth doesn't drive engagement. Fear does. Outrage does. Division does. Conflict does. A 2019 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that stories with negative emotional content get 63% more engagement than neutral stories. The media doesn't show you what's happening. It shows you what keeps you watching. And what keeps you watching is content that triggers your amygdala, the fear center of your brain. When you're afraid, you don't think critically. You react. You look for protection, for simple answers, for someone to blame, for a tribe to join. And the media happily provides all of those things, along with 24/7 coverage of whatever manufactured crisis is trending today. Here's the test. Turn off the news for 1 week. Completely. Just 1 week. See how you feel. Most people report feeling calmer, less anxious, less angry. Why? Because they stopped mainlining fear and outrage into their brains. They stopped letting someone else decide what matters. They stopped being programmed. And suddenly, the world looks different. Less urgent. Less terrifying. Less binary. Because the urgency, terror, the binary thinking, that was all manufactured by media that profits from your fear, from your outrage, from your attention. You flip between CNN and Fox thinking you're getting different perspectives. You're not. You're getting different flavors of the same product. It's like choosing between Pepsi and Coke, thinking you're rebelling against soda companies. You're still buying soda. They're still winning. Both channels want the same thing: your attention, your fear, your tribal loyalty. They just target different tribes. But the mechanism is identical. Select, frame, repeat, trigger emotional response, prevent thinking, manufacture consent. And it's working. People genuinely believe they're well informed because they watch the news. They're not informed. They're marinated, soaked in a carefully designed reality that serves everyone except them. Their elephant has been trained which things to fear, which people to hate, which tribe to join, which authorities to trust, all through carefully curated content that feels like information but functions as conditioning. Bonhoeffer watched this happen with Nazi propaganda, newspapers, radio, rallies, and he realized, once media controls information flow, truth becomes optional. People will believe what they're repeatedly exposed to, not because they're stupid, because that's how brains work. Repetition creates belief. Familiarity creates truth. And media controls repetition and familiarity, which means media controls belief and truth. For everyone who doesn't notice the mechanism, for everyone whose rider is asleep while their elephant is being herded, this is the machinery of collective stupidity. Not evil people lying, but systems that profit from your attention. Systems that discovered fear and outrage generate attention better than truth. Systems that have optimized for engagement instead of enlightenment. And systems that have made you complicit. Because you keep watching, keep clicking, keep sharing, keep feeding the machine, while genuinely believing you're staying informed, while thinking for yourself, while being rational. But you're not. You're being programmed. And the programming is so good that you can't see it from the inside, because it feels like your thoughts, your concerns, your conclusions. The machinery has evolved beyond Bonhoeffer's nightmares, because at least in Nazi Germany, you knew you were being propagandized. You could choose to resist. But modern media propaganda disguises itself as information, as choice, as thinking for yourself. And your elephant believes it, because your elephant can't tell the difference between what you think and what you've been trained to think. And that's collective stupidity. Not lack of intelligence, but presence of manipulation so sophisticated that intelligence becomes irrelevant. Because intelligence without awareness is just a more articulate kind of stupidity. And the media has made sure you're unaware, while feeling very, very smart. Part 3. The Psychology of Surrender. Chapter 7. Why your brain wants you to be stupid. Let me tell you something uncomfortable about evolution. Your brain wasn't designed to find truth. It was designed to help you survive. And in the ancestral environment, Survival meant making quick decisions with limited information. Better to assume the rustling bush is a predator and be wrong than assume it's wind and be dead. So evolution favored brains that jump to conclusions, that see patterns even when patterns don't exist, that trust the group over individual perception, that obey authority to avoid conflict, that believe comforting lies over uncomfortable truths. These weren't bugs. They were features, life-saving features, for 200,000 years. But then something changed. We built civilization. We created complex systems. We developed technology. We started facing problems that required careful thought instead of quick reaction. Problems where jumping to conclusions gets you killed, where trusting authority leads to atrocity, where believing comforting lies leads to catastrophe. But our brains didn't get the memo. We're still running Stone Age software in a digital age world. And that mismatch, that's collective stupidity. Not because we're stupid, because we're using the wrong kind of intelligence for the problems we face. Leon Festinger discovered this in the 1950s with his research on cognitive dissonance. He showed that when people encounter information that contradicts their beliefs, their brains fight to reject it, not through conscious thought, through unconscious discomfort. The contradiction creates psychological pain, and pain is a signal to stop, to retreat, to avoid. So people avoid contradictory information, not because they're closed-minded, because their brain is trying to protect them from psychological pain. But here's the problem. In the modern world, avoiding contradictory information makes you stupid, because truth is often uncomfortable. Reality often contradicts what you want to believe, and if your brain automatically rejects uncomfortable truths, you end up believing comfortable lies. Your elephant is protecting you from psychological pain, but that protection makes you vulnerable to manipulation, to propaganda, to functional stupidity. Bonhoeffer understood this intuitively. He wrote, "The power of some requires the stupidity of others." But he didn't have modern neuroscience to explain why. Now we do. Your brain's protective mechanisms, the ones that kept your ancestors alive, are the same mechanisms that make you vulnerable to collective stupidity, cognitive dissonance avoidance, pattern detection, authority bias, tribal conformity, all survival features, all modern vulnerabilities. Jonathan Haidt explains it with his moral foundations theory. Humans have 6 moral foundations: care/harm, fairness/cheating, loyalty/betrayal, authority/subversion, sanctity/degradation, liberty/oppression. These aren't learned. They're innate, evolutionary, and they're triggered automatically by your elephant, without conscious thought. Politicians know this. They don't argue with your logic. They trigger your moral foundations. They're threatening your family. Care/harm. They're cheating the system. Fairness. They're betraying our values. Loyalty. They're undermining authority. Authority. They're desecrating what's sacred. Sanctity. They're oppressing you. Liberty. Notice how every political message hits at least one foundation. That's not accident. That's engineering. Targeting your elephant. Bypassing your rider. Creating emotional response without thought. And it works. Because your elephant responds to moral foundations faster than your rider can think. You feel outrage, disgust, fear, loyalty, before you've analyzed anything. Before you've checked facts, before you've thought it through. Your elephant has already decided. And your rider just rationalizes afterward, finds reasons why the emotional response was right, even when it wasn't, especially when it wasn't. This is what Bonhoeffer meant by stupidity as a sociological problem. Individual psychology makes us vulnerable, But group dynamics exploit that vulnerability. When everyone in your tribe is having the same emotional response, when all your moral foundations are being triggered in the same direction, when your elephant and everyone else's elephant are stampeding together, your rider doesn't stand a chance. The social pressure is too strong. The emotional pull is too powerful. The cognitive cost of resisting is too high. So you go along. Not because you're stupid. Because your brain is working exactly as designed. Conserving energy. Avoiding pain. Trusting the group. Following authority. All adaptive behaviors. In the ancestral environment. All catastrophically maladaptive in the modern world, where they make you the perfect raw material for collective stupidity. Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for discovering that humans are not rational actors. We're rationalizing actors. We don't use logic to reach conclusions. We use conclusions to find logic. Backward reasoning. Post hoc rationalization. The elephant decides. The rider explains. And we believe we thought it through. But we didn't. We felt it, then justified it, and called that thinking. This isn't occasionally true. It's usually true. For you. For me. For everyone. We're all doing this. All the time. In ways we don't notice. Because the rider is excellent at creating the illusion that it's in control. That it made the decision. That logic was involved. But neuroscience reveals the truth. The rider is a public relations officer for the elephant. Its job isn't to steer. It's to explain. To justify. To defend. To make it look like rational decision-making happened when it didn't. And this is why smart people are just as susceptible to collective stupidity as anyone else. Because intelligence doesn't change the elephant. It just makes the rider better at rationalization. The smarter you are, the better you are at constructing elaborate justifications for what your elephant already decided. The more educated you are, the more sophisticated your post hoc reasoning becomes. But it's still post hoc, still rationalization, still stupidity disguised as intelligence. A study by Yale's Dan Kahan demonstrated this perfectly. He gave people with different political beliefs the same mathematical problem. But he framed it as either being about skin cream or gun control. When it was about skin cream, everyone solved it correctly. When it was about gun control, people's political beliefs determined their answer. Conservatives saw the data as supporting gun rights. Liberals saw it as supporting gun control. Same data, same math, different tribal identity, different conclusion. And both sides thought they were being objective, being logical, using their intelligence. But they weren't. Their elephants had decided based on tribal identity. Their riders just found math to support it. Intelligence became a weapon for defending bias. Education became a tool for sophisticated stupidity. And neither side could see it. Because you can't see the elephant from the rider's perspective. The rider thinks it's steering. But it's just rationalizing wherever the elephant goes. This is why facts don't change minds. Because minds aren't changed by facts. They're changed by, well, that's the problem. What changes minds when facts don't work? When logic is just rationalization? When intelligence serves bias? When education reinforces stupidity? That's the crisis of our age. And Bonhoeffer saw it coming. Because he watched it happen. Watched brilliant people believe stupid things. Educated people support atrocity. Religious people abandon morality. All while thinking they were being rational, logical, right. But they weren't thinking. They were feeling, and justifying, and defending, and conforming, and obeying. All unconscious, all automatic. All the elephant driving while the rider sleeps. Or worse, while the rider rationalizes everything the elephant does and calls it thinking. That's functional stupidity, not absence of intelligence. Misuse of intelligence. Intelligence in service of the elephant instead of truth. And once intelligence serves bias instead of truth, intelligence becomes dangerous. Because intelligent stupidity is more convincing than regular stupidity. More articulate, more confident, more resistant to correction. This is why Bonhoeffer said we're defenseless against stupidity. Because stupidity doesn't know it's stupid. It thinks it's smart. And the smarter your writer is, the more convincing your stupidity becomes. To yourself and others. You're not lacking intelligence. You're using intelligence for the wrong purpose. To defend. To justify. To rationalize. Instead of to discover. To question. To think. And your brain wants it that way. Because thinking is expensive. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. Changing your mind is painful. Your brain evolved to avoid all of that. To conserve energy. To maintain consistency. To protect existing beliefs. Even when those beliefs are wrong. Especially when those beliefs are wrong. Because the psychological cost of admitting you're wrong is higher than the benefit of being right. So your brain chooses comfort over truth. Every time. Unless you force it not to. Unless you notice the mechanism. Unless you wake up the writer and make it actually steer instead of just rationalizing. But that's hard. Harder than it's ever been. Because the modern world has gotten so good at triggering your elephant. At exploiting your cognitive biases. At making rationalization feel like reasoning. At convincing your writer that it's in control when it's not. At manufacturing collective stupidity while making everyone feel smart, individual, independent, rational. And that's the trap. The trap Bonhoeffer saw, but couldn't fully explain. The trap neuroscience now reveals in brutal detail. Your brain is designed to make you stupid under certain conditions. And we've built a civilization that creates those conditions. Constantly. For everyone. While convincing everyone they're thinking for themselves. That's collective stupidity. That's the crisis. That's what we're facing. And it's not getting better. It's getting worse. Because the machinery exploiting your brain is getting more sophisticated. While your brain stays the same. Running ancient software. In a world designed to hack it. Chapter 8. The tribe will make you stupid, and you'll thank it. Here's a truth that will make you uncomfortable. You don't think for yourself. Not as much as you believe. Most of your opinions? Tribal. Absorbed from your group. Defended not because they're true, but because they're yours. Because questioning them feels like betraying your tribe. And betraying your tribe, in your brain's ancient logic, equals death. Let me prove it. Think of your most controversial opinions. The ones you'd argue about at dinner. Now ask yourself, did you arrive at these through careful, independent analysis? Or did you inherit them from your political party, your religion, your family, your friend group, your online community? Be brutally honest. Most of your beliefs are inherited, not chosen, not thought through. Inherited, and then defended as if you discovered them yourself. This isn't weakness. It's evolution. For 200,000 years, humans survived in tribes of 50 to 150 people. If you were cast out, you died. Simple as that. No tribe meant no protection, no resources, no mates, no survival. So your brain developed powerful mechanisms to keep you inside the tribe. To make you think like the tribe. Value what the tribe values. Hate what the tribe hates. Because conformity meant survival. And survival meant passing on genes. So we're all descendants of people who were really good at conforming. Solomon Asch proved this in 1951. He put people in a room with actors. Showed them 3 lines. Asked which one matched a reference line. The answer was obvious. Line B clearly matched, but the actors all said line C. And here's what happened. 75% of real subjects agreed with the obviously wrong answer at least once. 1/3 conformed consistently, even when the answer was objectively, visibly wrong, even when they knew better. They conformed. After the experiment, Ash interviewed subjects. They knew the answer was wrong, but they conformed anyway. Why? I didn't want to look stupid. I thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. Everyone else seemed so sure. This is the tribal mind. Knowing the truth. Saying the lie. Because the tribe matters more than truth. Because disagreeing feels unbearable. Because your elephant interprets disagreeing with the group as a survival threat. And survival trumps truth. Every time. And that was in a room with strangers. About lines. Imagine how much stronger the pressure is with your actual tribe. Your friends. Your family. Your political party. Your online community. The people whose approval you need. Whose rejection you fear. The pressure to conform isn't subtle. It's overwhelming. Most people aren't even aware they're surrendering to it. They think they're thinking independently. But they're not. They're conforming. And calling it conviction. Jonathan Haidt explains in The Righteous Mind that humans aren't primarily rational beings. We're primarily tribal beings. We didn't evolve to seek truth. We evolved to maintain group cohesion. Truth is valuable only if it helps the tribe. If truth threatens the tribe, we reject truth. Instantly. Automatically. Without conscious thought. Because tribal survival is more important than individual truth. That's the evolutionary logic. Still running. Still driving behavior. Still creating collective stupidity. This is why facts don't change political opinions. Because political opinions aren't based on facts. They're based on tribal identity. You're not a Democrat because you carefully analyzed policy positions. You're a Democrat because Democrats are your tribe. Same with Republicans. Same with any group. The positions come second. The identity comes first. And once identity is locked in, you'll defend any position your tribe takes. Even positions that contradict previous positions. Even positions you can't explain. Because it's not about the position. It's about the tribe. Watch what happens when someone leaves their political tribe. Their former tribe doesn't say, "Interesting, why did you change your mind?" They say, "Traitor." Because that's what it is, tribally speaking. You didn't just change an opinion. You betrayed the tribe. Switched sides. Joined the enemy. And that's unforgivable. Not intellectually. Tribally. Because tribes don't survive if members can just leave. So tribes punish leaving with social death. Exile. Shunning. Cancellation. And your brain knows this. Deeply. Instinctively. Which is why changing your mind feels like dying. In a way it is. You're killing your tribal identity. And being reborn into a new one. That's not casual. That's traumatic. So people don't change their minds. They defend. Fiercely. Irrationally. Against all evidence. Because they're not defending ideas. They're defending identity. They're defending belonging. They're defending survival. And against survival instinct, logic doesn't stand a chance. The elephant doesn't care about truth. It cares about staying in the tribe. And the rider will find whatever logic necessary to justify staying. Even terrible logic. Even obvious rationalization. Even stupidity. Because tribal belonging is more important than being right. This explains collective stupidity perfectly. Millions of people holding identical stupid positions. Not because they're all individually stupid, but because they're all tribally committed. The tribe has decided, so they defend. And defending feels like thinking. But it's not. It's tribal behavior masquerading as intellectual independence. It's the elephant stampeding with the herd while the rider convinces itself it's steering. Here's a test. Find an opinion you hold strongly. Now try to argue the opposite side. Genuinely. Not a strawman version. The strongest possible version. Can you do it? If you can't, your opinion isn't based on thinking. It's based on tribe. Because if you've actually thought something through, you can articulate opposing viewpoints. You understand why people disagree. You can steelman their position even while disagreeing. But if you can only strawman the other side, you're not thinking. You're tribing. Most people fail this test spectacularly because they've never actually engaged with opposing views. They've only engaged with their tribe's caricature of opposing views. They know the other side is stupid/evil/brainwashed because their tribe said so, not because they investigated, and investigating feels unnecessary, because tribe already told you the truth. Why waste time on enemy propaganda? This is the echo chamber, not just online, in your head. Your tribe speaks. You listen. Their views become your views. Their enemies become your enemies. Their values become your values. And you call this thinking for yourself. But it's not. It's tribal absorption, ideological infection, mimetic colonization. And the scary part, it feels identical to independent thought. You can't tell the difference from the inside, because your writer is excellent at generating reasons why you independently arrived at the exact same conclusions as your tribe. What a coincidence, right? Wrong. Not coincidence. Conformity. Unconscious, automatic, evolutionarily adaptive conformity that's creating collective stupidity at scale. Because when millions of people all conform to their tribal beliefs, all reject outside information, all strawman opposing views, all feel certain they're right, what you get isn't a diversity of thought. What you get is a collection of tribes, each one convinced they're thinking independently, each one identical within themselves, all of them stupid in their own special way. Yuval Noah Harari points out that humans are the only species that cooperate flexibly in large numbers. We can work with strangers, build nations, create institutions, all because of shared fictions, shared beliefs, shared narratives. Money is a shared fiction. Laws are shared fictions. Nations are shared fictions. None of them exist objectively. They exist because we collectively believe they exist. And that collective belief creates real effects. But here's the catch. These shared fictions require conformity. If everyone believes different things, cooperation breaks down. So culture creates massive pressure to conform, to believe the tribal narrative, to defend it against outsiders, and to punish members who question it. This isn't conspiracy. It's system dynamics. And it makes independent thought not just difficult, but dangerous. Tribally dangerous. Socially dangerous. Professionally dangerous. Psychologically dangerous. This is why whistleblowers are destroyed. Why reformers are rejected. Why truth-tellers are crucified. Not because they're wrong, but because they threaten tribal cohesion. And threatening the tribe is the worst possible crime. Worse than lying. Worse than failing. Worse than anything. Because without the tribe, we're nothing. That's the ancient logic. Still running. Still driving behavior. Still making otherwise intelligent people defend obviously stupid positions. Because the positions don't matter. The tribe matters. And as long as the tribe is defending something, you'll defend it too. Even if it's indefensible. Even if you know it's indefensible. Because the tribe doesn't negotiate with dissent. The solution isn't to leave all tribes. That's impossible. Humans are social. We need belonging. The solution is to notice when tribe is thinking for you. Notice when you're defending tribal positions instead of thinking independently. Notice when you're attacking outsiders instead of engaging their arguments. Notice when you're more concerned with tribal victory than truth. That noticing creates space. Space between stimulus and response. Space for actual thought, instead of tribal reflex. But that space is lonely, because thinking for yourself means disagreeing with your tribe sometimes. And disagreeing with tribe means risking exile. Not physical exile. Social exile. Being seen as traitor, outsider, enemy, other. And that hurts. Deeply. Instinctively. Terrifyingly. Which is why most people never do it. They conform. Repeat tribal positions. Attack tribal enemies. Defend tribal narratives. And call it thinking. While actual thinking dies. Quietly. Unnoticed. Unmourned. Replaced by tribal certainty that feels like wisdom but functions as stupidity. Collective stupidity isn't about IQ. It's about tribe overriding thought. Millions of smart people believing stupid things because their tribe requires it. And tribe is survival. So they choose tribe every time and call it conviction. While Bonhoeffer's warning echoes from his prison cell, against stupidity we are defenseless. Because the stupidity doesn't announce itself as stupidity. It announces itself as loyalty, as solidarity, as belonging, as us versus them. And your elephant runs toward us and away from them without your rider ever noticing. And by the time you realize you've been running, you're so far into tribal territory that turning back feels impossible, feels like death. So you don't turn back. You double down and call it thinking and become exactly what Bonhoeffer warned about. Not evil, just functionally stupid, tribally stupid, collectively stupid, while feeling certain, while feeling right, while feeling smart. That's the trap. That's the crisis. That's what's happening right now. To you, to me, to everyone, unless we notice. Unless we resist, unless we think, despite the tribe, despite the comfort, despite the cost. Part 4, The Systemic Acceleration. Chapter 9, How Big Tech Weaponized Your Weakness. Let me show you something that should terrify you. The biggest technology companies in the world have one product. Not search, not social media, not entertainment. You are the product. Your attention, your data, your behavior, your psychology, packaged, sold, optimized, at scale, for profit. And they're really, really good at it. Tristan Harris worked at Google as a design ethicist. His job was to make products that respect human attention and values. Then he realized something. That's not what the company wants. They want the opposite. Products that hijack attention, that exploit weaknesses, that keep people using despite knowing better. He tried to reform from within, failed, then quit and became a whistleblower. His warning? We're in a race to the bottom of the brainstem. Every company competing to hijack your attention more effectively than competitors, using techniques from behavioral psychology, neuroscience, and gambling addiction. Variable reward schedules, social validation metrics, fear of missing out, infinite scroll, autoplay, notifications, all designed by PhDs in persuasion psychology, all tested on billions of users, all optimized for one thing: addiction. Not engagement, addiction. The technical term is variable ratio reinforcement schedule. The layman's term is slot machine. You pull the lever, scroll down. Maybe you win, interesting content. Maybe you don't, boring content. The uncertainty is what creates addiction, not the reward, the possibility of reward, the maybe this time. That's why you can't stop scrolling even when everything is boring. You're chasing the maybe, and tech companies know this. They designed for it, deliberately. Sean Parker, founding president of Facebook, admitted this in 2017. The thought process that went into building these applications was, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? It's a social validation feedback loop. We exploit a vulnerability in human psychology, and we knew what we were doing, and we did it anyway. Read that again. We knew what we were doing, and we did it anyway. Not ignorance, not accident, deliberate exploitation of psychological vulnerabilities, at scale, for profit, creating what's essentially the largest behavioral modification project in human history, with billions of participants, none of whom consented, most of whom don't even know it's happening. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day, every 10 minutes, even during meals, conversations, sleep. That's not choice. That's addiction, engineered addiction. And the engineering is brilliant. Push notifications create urgency. Red dots create anxiety. Like counts create validation dependency. Social comparison creates insecurity. FOMO creates compulsive checking. All of this generates engagement, and engagement generates data, and data generates ad revenue, and ad revenue generates more investment in more sophisticated manipulation. It's a feedback loop, but not for your benefit, for theirs. You're not using the technology. It's using you. Your attention is extracted. Your data is harvested. Your behavior is modified. Your psychology is exploited. All invisibly. All while you think you're just staying connected, or being informed, or expressing yourself. You're not. You're feeding the machine. And the machine is getting smarter, faster, more effective, while you're getting more distracted, more anxious, more addicted, more stupid. Because here's what happens to your brain. Every time you check your phone, you're interrupting whatever you were thinking about. Cal Newport calls this attention residue. When you switch tasks, part of your attention stays on the previous task. So when you're trying to read a book but checking your phone every few minutes, part of your brain is always on your phone, even when you're not looking at it. You're never fully present, never fully focused, always scattered. And scattered attention can't think deeply, can't analyze carefully, can't learn effectively, can only process shallowly, react quickly, feel emotionally, which is exactly what drives engagement, which is exactly what they want. Neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley explains, every attention switch has a cognitive cost. Your brain must reorient, refocus, rebuild context. On social media, you're switching attention every few seconds. Post, ad, comment, video, notification, meme. Your brain is constantly reorienting, never focusing, never going deep, always surface. This isn't just distraction. It's rewiring, neuroplasticity. Your brain is physically adapting to constant shallow processing, getting better at distraction, worse at focus, better at reaction, worse at reflection, better at surface, worse at depth. Nicholas Carr documented this in The Shallows. Brain scans show it. Cognitive tests confirm it. People who spend hours daily on shallow digital consumption literally develop different brain structures than people who read books. Not metaphorically, literally. Different neural pathways, different cognitive capacities, different thinking abilities. The technology isn't just stealing your time. It's changing your brain, making you into the kind of person who can't think deeply, who processes shallowly, who reacts emotionally, who consumes constantly, who thinks they're informed but are actually just distracted. And tech companies know this. Internal documents from Facebook, released by whistleblower Frances Haugen, show they knew their platforms harm mental health, increase anxiety, damage self-esteem, promote eating disorders, spread misinformation, amplify extremism. They knew, and they did it anyway, because engagement was more important than well-being. Profit was more important than ethics. Growth was more important than truth. And they could get away with it because the harm is invisible, gradual, normalized. You don't notice you're getting stupider. You just are. Slowly, day by day, scroll by scroll. A MIT study found that false information spreads 6 times faster than truth on Twitter. Why? Because false information is more emotionally arousing, more surprising, more shareable. Truth is often boring, nuanced, complex. Lies are simple, shocking, satisfying. So the algorithm amplifies lies, not because it wants to spread misinformation, because it wants engagement, and lies engage better than truth. So lies win, truth loses, and collective stupidity accelerates, not through conspiracy, through incentives. The system rewards making people stupid, so people get stupid, while the companies profit. But here's where it gets really dark: personalization. The algorithm doesn't show everyone the same content. It shows each person content uniquely designed to keep them engaged, based on years of behavioral data, based on everything you've clicked, liked, shared, watched, searched. The algorithm knows you better than you know yourself. It knows what triggers you, what confirms your biases, what makes you angry, what keeps you scrolling, and it gives you exactly that. Constantly, forever, creating a personalized reality tunnel where you only see content designed to keep you engaged, not informed, not challenged, engaged, which means confirmed, which means stupider. And because everyone's in their own reality tunnel, we can't even agree on basic facts anymore, because we're literally seeing different information, curated by algorithms optimizing for engagement, not truth. One person sees evidence that confirms their beliefs. Another sees evidence that confirms their different beliefs. Both think they're informed. Neither is. Both are being manipulated into certainty, into tribalism, into functional stupidity, while thinking they're thinking for themselves. This is what Bonhoeffer never could have imagined. He saw propaganda that was the same for everyone. We have propaganda that's personalized for everyone. He saw one authority controlling information. We have algorithms, inscrutable and automated, controlling information for billions of people simultaneously. He saw collective stupidity created through fear and authority. We have collective stupidity created through addiction and personalization. The machinery has evolved beyond his nightmare, and we're living inside it. Voluntarily, enthusiastically, addictedly, while calling it connection, while calling it information, while calling it freedom. It's none of those things. It's mass behavioral modification. It's attention extraction. It's cognitive degradation. At scale, for profit. And it's working. Brilliantly. Invisibly. Inevitably. You think you're immune because you're aware of it? You're not. Awareness helps, but it's not enough, because the machinery targets your elephant, your unconscious, your automatic systems, and those don't care that you're aware. They respond anyway. You know social media is addictive. You check anyway. You know the algorithm manipulates you. You scroll anyway. You know it's making you stupider. You use it anyway. Because awareness without change is just sophisticated helplessness. And tech companies are betting on that. Betting that you'll be aware, but not change. That you'll complain, but keep using. That you'll know better, but do it anyway. And they're winning that bet. Every day. On billions of people. Including you. Chapter 10. The Influencer Industrial Complex, or How Stupidity Became a Business Model. Let me tell you about a new kind of authority figure. One that Bonhoeffer never encountered. One that's more dangerous than politicians or priests because they don't look like authorities. They look like friends. Like regular people. Like you. But they're not. They're influencers. And they're functionally paid to make you stupid. Here's how it works. Someone gets followers. Maybe through luck. Maybe through talent. Maybe through controversy. Doesn't matter how. What matters is they have an audience. And audiences have value. Not to the followers. To brands. To companies. To anyone selling something. Because influencers can influence. Can make people buy things. Believe things. Do things. Not through authority. Through parasocial relationship. through the illusion of friendship, through authenticity performance. And what sells best? Not nuance, not complexity, not careful thought. Certainty sells. Simple answers sell. Tribal identity sells. Outrage sells. Confirmation sells. So that's what influencers provide, regardless of truth, regardless of consequences, regardless of whether they actually believe it, because the algorithm rewards engagement, brands reward reach, and both reward simplicity over truth, certainty over accuracy, tribal signaling over independent thought. This creates a perverse incentive structure. The more stupid your content, the more engagement it gets. The more engagement it gets, the more money you make. The more money you make, the more you create stupid content. It's a stupidity feedback loop. And it's incredibly profitable. For the influencer, the platform, the brands, everyone except the audience, who are being made steadily stupider, while paying for the privilege, through attention, through data, through purchasing decisions, through behavioral modification. Think about health influencers, wellness gurus, biohackers. Most have zero scientific training, zero medical expertise, zero accountability, but they have charisma. They have confidence. They have large followings. So they sell supplements, promote diets, make medical claims, with zero evidence, sometimes against evidence, and people believe them. Why? Because they seem authentic, relatable, not like those corrupt experts with their complicated studies and qualified statements. These influencers know the real truth, the simple truth, the truth that big pharma/big food/big medicine doesn't want you to know. This is conspiracy thinking packaged as authenticity, and it's devastatingly effective because it triggers your elephant. Distrust of authority? Confirmed. Simple solutions to complex problems? Provided. Tribal identity against an enemy? Established. Your writer gets to feel smart for doing your own research, which really means watching YouTube videos that confirm what you want to believe. And the influencer gets rich, while you get stupider, or sick, or both. Or take political influencers. Most have never held office, never studied policy, never worked in government, but they have opinions, strong opinions, confidently delivered, about everything, economics, foreign policy, constitutional law, all simplified into tribal talking points, all designed to trigger outrage, all confirmed by their audience who already believed it anyway. Creating echo chambers where everyone's certain and everyone's stupid. But it feels like being informed, feels like being engaged, feels like thinking for yourself. It's none of those things. It's passive consumption of tribal propaganda, delivered by someone who seems like a friend but is actually a business. The economics are stark. Influencers don't make money being nuanced. They don't get paid for admitting uncertainty. They don't grow audiences by saying it's complicated. They make money being certain, being simple, being tribal, being engaging. And engaging means emotional, which means triggering the elephant, which means bypassing thought, which means creating stupidity, but profitable stupidity, scalable stupidity, stupidity as a service. And the audiences don't realize they're customers. They think they're community. They think they're learning. They think they're part of something. They're not. They're being farmed. Their attention is the crop. Their data is the harvest. Their behavior modification is the product. And the influencer is the farmer, working for the platform, working for the brands, not working for you, never working for you, even though they call you family, even though they seem authentic, even though they respond to comments. It's all performance, all business, all exploitation, dressed up as authenticity. Dr. Lindsay Doe, a sexologist, described this as edutainment versus education. Real education is boring, careful, qualified. It depends. More research needed. Multiple perspectives exist. That doesn't engage, doesn't go viral, doesn't make money. Edutainment does. Simplified, certain, entertaining, wrong, but viral. So influencers choose edutainment, choose revenue over accuracy, choose engagement over truth, and call it making education accessible. No, you're making ignorance profitable. There's a difference, and the damage compounds. Because influencers don't just spread misinformation. They model epistemic behavior. They teach their audiences how to think about information. And what they model is trust charismatic individuals over institutional expertise. Trust simple explanations over complex ones. Trust what feels right over what's been verified. Trust your tribe over contradicting evidence. This isn't just wrong information. It's wrong thinking. It's training people in functional stupidity at scale, while making it seem like critical thinking, like questioning authority, like doing your own research. But you're not doing research. Research means reading studies, understanding methodology, evaluating evidence, being willing to change your mind. What you're actually doing is consumption of content designed to confirm what you already believe, delivered by people paid to keep you consuming, who have zero incentive to challenge you, zero incentive to complicate your beliefs, zero incentive to make you uncertain, because uncertainty doesn't engage, doesn't convert, doesn't generate revenue. So they give you certainty. Simple, tribal, wrong, but profitable for them, while you get stupider for free. Well, not free. For your attention, your data, your money, your vote, your brain. This is the influencer industrial complex, a self-reinforcing system where stupidity is profitable, where nuance is punished, where expertise is dismissed as elitism, where confidence matters more than competence, where reach matters more than accuracy, where engagement matters more than enlightenment, and where millions of people are being systematically made stupider by people they trust, who seem like friends, who call them community, but who are actually just businesses, monetizing attention, harvesting data, modifying behavior, while claiming to educate, to empower, to awaken. They're doing the opposite. They're putting you to sleep, while making you feel awake. That's the business model. That's the con. That's collective stupidity as a service. And it's working. On millions, maybe billions, including people who think they're too smart to fall for it. Especially them. Because intelligence without epistemic humility is just articulate stupidity. And the influencers are counting on that. Part 5. The Path Back to Thinking. Chapter 11. What Bonhoeffer didn't live to tell us. Bonhoeffer died in 1945 with an unfinished theory. He identified the problem, functional stupidity. He described the mechanism, intellectual surrender under systemic pressure. But he died before articulating the solution. The answers he began sketching point toward costly grace, thinking independently when it's painful, unpopular, or dangerous. But now we're not just fighting social pressure. We're fighting evolution. Trillion-dollar algorithms. Our own brains. Cultural infrastructure built to manufacture stupidity at scale. So solutions must be comprehensive, addressing individual courage and systemic design, personal choice and collective infrastructure, moral will and psychological understanding, individual practices, intellectual friction. Once per week, spend 1 hour engaging with the strongest version of an argument you disagree with. Not a strawman. The actual best case someone smart could make for a position you reject. This is uncomfortable. Your elephant will scream to stop. Those screams are signs of tribal immunity. Signs your beliefs aren't based on thought, but conformity. Productive ignorance. When you're absolutely certain about something complex, ask, what evidence would change my mind? If you can't think of any, that's dogma, not confidence. Real thinkers can always articulate what would change their mind. Share friction before sharing anything online. Take 60 seconds to verify it from an independent source. That's all. Most people don't. They share based on headlines, on feelings, on tribal confirmation, without reading, without checking, without thinking. 60 seconds breaks that cycle. Embrace, I don't know. When you encounter complex issues you haven't studied deeply, say, I don't know, instead of having an opinion. Our culture rewards confident ignorance over humble uncertainty. Saying, I don't know, is intellectual honesty, the foundation of actual thinking. Structural solutions, platform accountability. Social media companies must disclose how algorithms work, what they optimize for, how they manipulate behavior, and face real consequences for harms, legal liability, financial penalties, criminal charges. The same accountability we apply to other industries harming public health. Media literacy education, starting elementary school, teaching source evaluation, manipulation spotting, fact from opinion, logical fallacies, how to question authority, how to think instead of react, as fundamental as reading and math, because a democracy requires citizens who can think. We're producing consumers, followers, perfect raw material for collective stupidity. Economic reform. Bonhoeffer noted stupidity emerges under stress. When people work multiple jobs, drown in debt, worry about healthcare and housing, they don't have mental bandwidth for careful thinking. Intellectual surrender becomes survival strategy. So if we want people to think, reduce the stress preventing thinking. Universal healthcare, living wages, affordable housing, economic security. Because a stressed population is a stupid population, and a stupid population is a controllable population. These are beginnings, not complete solutions, but directions, requiring work, courage, sustained effort. Things most won't do because they're hard, because they require admitting we're part of the problem, that we've been functionally stupid. That individual responsibility and systemic reform are both necessary, that there are no easy answers, no heroic individuals who will save us, only hard work, collective work. That might not succeed, but that has to be attempted, because the alternative is unacceptable. Collective stupidity deepening, spreading, until thinking becomes impossible, until Bonhoeffer's warning becomes prophecy, and humanity becomes something else, something less, something that once could think, but surrendered that capacity. That's the alternative. That's the future we're sliding toward, unless we resist, unless we think, unless we choose costly grace over comfortable stupidity. Starting now, despite the cost, despite the difficulty, despite the loneliness, because easy gets us collective stupidity, and hard gets us a chance at thinking, at truth, at humanity. That's the choice. What will you choose? Part 6, the final question. Chapter 12, Who Stands Fast? April 9th, 1945. Dietrich Bonhoeffer walked to the gallows. Naked, humiliated. His last words, "This is the end for me, the beginning of life." 23 days later, Nazi Germany surrendered. He died weeks before vindication. Never knew he was right. Never knew his resistance mattered. He died uncertain, alone, but thinking, always thinking, standing fast. That's his question for us. Who stands fast? Not rhetorical, urgent, because collective stupidity isn't coming. It's here, accelerating. And every day, more people surrender. Quietly, one tribal certainty at a time, one algorithmic click at a time. until thinking becomes the exception, and nobody notices, because everyone's doing it. But it's not inevitable. It's a choice. Thousands of small choices. Every day. To think or consume. Question or accept. Resist or surrender. You've seen the machinery. The algorithms exploiting your attention. The tribes colonizing your thoughts. The systems rewarded by your stupidity. Now you can't unknow it. Now you choose. Here's your choice. Return to comfortable stupidity. Your algorithms. Your tribes. Your certainties. Nobody will judge you. Most people make this choice. It's easy, comfortable, normal, and it leads exactly where Bonhoeffer warned. Or choose costly grace, the hard path, thinking despite tribal pressure, questioning despite algorithmic resistance, standing fast when everyone else surrenders. This path is lonely, hard, uncertain. You'll lose friends, lose community, lose certainty's comfort, and you won't know if it matters. Bonhoeffer didn't know either. He died uncertain. That's the cost. Here's what thinking looks like in practice. Every time you encounter information, am I thinking or consuming? Every time you form an opinion, is this tribal or considered? Every time you feel certain, what would change my mind? Every time you share something, have I verified this? Every time you dismiss opposing views, have I engaged with the strongest version? These questions are painful, time-consuming, socially costly. They make you uncertain when everyone else is certain, but they make you think. And thinking is the only defense against stupidity. You'll be lonely. People will think you're overthinking. Too intense. They'll wonder why you can't just relax. Be normal. And you'll wonder too, whether it's worth it, whether resistance matters. I can't answer that. I know it's necessary, but worth it? That's yours to decide. But individual practice isn't enough. We need platform accountability, media literacy education, economic policies that reduce stress, epistemic infrastructure rewarding truth over engagement. You can't think your way out of systems designed for stupidity. You need others. Systems. Politics. Power. The rise of collective stupidity isn't inevitable. It's billions of choices. Every day. To think or consume. Resist or surrender. Those choices accumulate into a future characterized by thought or stupidity. Wisdom or manipulation. Humanity or something less. That future starts now. With your next choice. Conclusion, the beginning. This is where most audiobooks give you motivation. This isn't that. This problem doesn't have a motivational solution. It has a choice. That starts now and never stops. You've learned how collective stupidity works. And now you know. You're part of it. You're not the victim. You're the vector. So what now? Action or surrender? Wake up before checking your phone. Research the strongest opposing argument to one belief you hold. Verify news from multiple sources. Ask what would change your mind. If nothing would, you have dogma, not an opinion. Listen to understand, not to respond. Not easy, not comfortable, but thinking. Bonhoeffer chose resistance. Cost him his life. He died uncertain whether it mattered, but he had stood fast. He had continued thinking, despite everything, because thinking is what makes you human. Surrender is what makes you less. The rise of collective stupidity is not inevitable. It's a choice. Your choice. And that choice is happening now. Not later. Not when you're ready. Now. I can't promise it will work. Bonhoeffer didn't know. Neither will you. You'll have to choose anyway. Who stands fast? That's Bonhoeffer's question. Who continues thinking when thinking is costly? Will you? The answer reveals everything. What you become. Human or post-human. Thinking or stupid. Standing or surrendering. That's the choice. That's now. Choose.